Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 5 of Politics of the Empire, presented by theempiremedia.com. Back after a long hiatus. We were last on in May, and it is now September. We did not intend to take a summer break like most teachers in the United States of America, but we did anyway. So welcome back.
Last time we were on this show, John McCain was still actually serving as a senator.
Was he, though?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of, sort of.
I mean, in name only?
Perhaps.
I mean, he's voted like once in a year, but prior to his
So have I, huh?
You were not paid by indirectly or directly by the citizens of the state of Arizona to vote on their behalf.
You're right. It's not like he didn't have a good excuse not to be in Washington to vote.
Yeah. Point taken. Point taken.
Abdicate. I know that's not the right word for this. Give up your seat. You're not abdicating the throne, but
he was voted in.
His term.
Unable to execute the office.
I don't think that.
If you want to talk about something
anywhere for Senate.
If you're talking about something impeachable, there you go.
You can't impeach a senator.
No,
whatever.
Yeah, you just have your term. That's it.
Yeah.
I actually find the idea of the immediate election or the emergency election, I actually find that terribly unconstitutional. I know that's probably a topic for a different show.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, let's leave it at that.
It should be appointed by the governor or left vacant.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in a different show.
Different show.
Put that on the bulletin board of things to discuss that we'll never get to all of them. As we initially teased when we first started doing this, we've got like a year and a half's worth of topics, and
we do.
Believe it or not, tonight's topic is going to be the censorship of political opinions on social media. That was on the topic board before it became hip with the kids and in the mainstream. So
hot button issue.
Yeah, I know we said we would try to stay away from issues of the day here on this podcast. I swear this was on the to-do list before it became cool. So we're going to be hipsters about it and talk about it anyway. Anyway, let's get right into it, guys. So, believe it or not, the founders and some of the CEOs of various social media companies were actually hauled up to Capitol Hill the past week.
Jack.
Yeah, Jack.
Jack
Dorsey. I believe the CEO, Cheryl, I forget her last name, of Facebook was there. Google was supposed to show up and they said, we're too cool for school.
Wait, Google has a social media?
Well,
did they get the person for Google Plus up there?
Yeah, I guess so. Chief Brand Officer of Google Plus. It's like Bob from the basement.
Yeah, Google just said, if we want your opinion, we'll steal it from you.
Yeah. Anyway, they were brought, to testify in front of a congressional panel. In typical U.S., Congress fashion, did an awful job. Basketball ring. Actually knows a little bit how the internets works.
Well, say what you want about Ted Cruz, but it is apparent that he has at least read the Constitution. More than once. Where I'm not sure I could say that for the vast majority of the people in Congress.
Mm-hmm. And and the other thing, it was also kind of sidetracked. You had the Kavanaugh hearings as well. So, believe it or not, it was not the biggest show in town. Did not get the attention it was deserved. And so, because of that, and it was already, like I said, it was already on our list. We're going to give the topic the attention it deserves. Now, we're not going to have a representative here from any of the social media firms to, I don't want to say interrogate, but ask questions of. But
Adam is on Twitter a lot, and I'm on Facebook a lot, so I think it's close enough. Right?
Sure.
So let's just go around the table. Let's start here first with just get your guys' thoughts about the hearings itself, and just a little bit, a brief, like, couple sentence introduction to your thoughts in general about the topic. So I won't necessarily want to pick an opinion on whether or not it's happening, but just, your thoughts on it in general. We'll get into whether or not it's happening in a bit. So Adam, how about you go first?
Okay. Just in general.
Just your thoughts, yeah.
Just
your thoughts about the first off the hearings and topic in general.
I like what you said about about a lot of these politicians not being up with the times here, because I know that
ask a boomer how Facebook works.
No, that's
ask intelligent questions.
No, because that's what I mean. When Zuckerberg was up there a few months ago, Zuckerbot. I mean, people could say what they want about Zuckerberg, and the guy is a total nut job sometimes. But I think it was Lindsey Graham that was asking him questions about how Facebook works, and he was asking him very kind of ambiguous questions where Zuckerbot had to go off and talk about just these different aspects. I think one of them was who's your biggest competitor right now? Okay, well there's a bunch
this isn't like cars where yes, there's another four-wheeled object that carries people and goes. There are different forms of social media that have a lot of overlap with each other. Honestly, their main competition is their own brand in Instagram.
Well, and there's different. I mean, there's different aspects to social media, which is going to draw different competitors from other areas.
True. The biggest competition in live video is either Periscope or YouTube.
Yeah.
Or Twitch.
Exactly. It all depends on what you're looking to do.
Their biggest competition for news aggregation is Twitter.
Yeah, and if you look
now, competition for pictures is Instagram.
And if you look now, Facebook is also trying to get into video game streaming,
live television.
Yeah, and something that Twitch is all about. So he was sitting here trying to answer that question, yet he didn't give one direct answer, so it was pissing people off. It was pissing off these politicians.
He's trying to answer honestly, and
they're not letting.
It's because you asked a dumb question.
Yes, and I mean, I really don't know how they approach this but it doesn't seem, surprised that the United States government and the politicians on Capitol Hill are the best ones to spearhead this type of thing.
In essence, he's asking an antiquated question for a modern answer, because he's asking okay, well, what's your biggest competition? As if
why
it's
is it relevant
1978 and you're asking the CEO of Ford who's your biggest competition. Because you can only have one car, maybe two, maybe three. Or you're asking the...
and that's the other thing is, it's cars are a tangible service. Right. Social media is really not.
You typically only have one at a time. And just like it'd be asking somebody in 1985 who was running Sony television, well, who's your biggest competitor for TV sets? Well, typically you only have one or two, maybe three in your house. But Facebook, to ask a competitor, maybe you only use one, maybe you use five, maybe you use 7, maybe you use 0. A ton of people out there don't use any social media. A ton of people out there only use one, but very few people only use one. You typically, maybe you favor one, maybe you use 3, maybe you use 2, maybe you don't use any. It's not really a tangible answer because you don't have to compete with them directly. To me, it's more akin of asking an owner of a bar, who's your biggest competitor? And they can say, well...
the corner liquor store.
I guess for most people, it's whatever bars down the street. But chances are, our patrons actually maybe go to both. Are the people that come in here on Tuesdays and have a beer or two, there's a really good chance that they go to the other bar on Thursdays and have a beer or two, and it doesn't actually affect our business. I feel like that's more of a tangible comparison. But that's not... I was just kind of... I wasn't trying to interrupt you, Adam.
No, I'm all set. Go ahead.
But to answer your original offshoot question, just my basic thoughts on it. My basic thoughts on the hearings are they were garbage. I don't have any basic thoughts on the hearings because I thought they were mismanaged, just like the vast majority of things done by government are. And quite frankly, I feel like Zuckerberg, or Zuckerbot, as you guys were calling him, did he do himself any favors on a personal level for making himself look better in these? No, he didn't. But at the end of the day, he kind of won the day because he answered the questions as is, and then he moved on, and he's still rich, and who cares? But my main question about this entire topic altogether is when social media, not if, but when social media is censoring the speech of others, is it a violation of the First Amendment? And to me, anyone out there, if I ask that question, is this a violation of the First Amendment? And if you definitively said yes, or definitively said no, you're wrong. You're wrong. Because it's deeper than that, and it's branching into it. And I feel like that, to me, is really the only question that's worth asking and worth answering in this is how or if is this violating your First Amendment right by limiting speech or limiting what you can say on social media? That, to me, is the question. And hopefully we can, if we don't answer that question tonight, maybe we can at least lend some insight to people who are struggling with that same answer. But I firmly will say that if I asked that question, you instantly said yes or instantly said no, I think you're wrong. Because I think there's a gray area here, and I think it's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be examined.
So, that's a good place to jump off at, Josh. The whole idea of is social media censorship of political opinion. First off, before we get into that, what is political speech to some is, and quite normal political speech, is often considered by others to be, offensive or hate speech. What, don't get me started on what does hate speech mean and the nebulous definition of that, but that is the problem. And you have one, let's call it, sector of the political spectrum predominantly running and creating rules in Silicon Valley, and what is offensive or hate speech to them is normie political speech to those who are there censoring. And that right there, because of the vagueness and lack of black and white, terms of service or rules or legislation per se, of that sort of concept, you end up with one side getting the ban hammer and the other side of being allowed to run amok. And that may not be a social media company's actual intention, is to favor one side or the other. They're just trying to keep their platform safe for whatever that means, for their users. And ultimately it's in pursuit of maximizing revenue. It's not in pursuit of necessarily a pursuit of a political goal. Some people may wield those tools in a pursuit of a political goal, but ultimately Twitter Corp and Facebook Inc. or whatever, their goal is to make more money, and because the data shows that if they give more people a positive user experience, they're more likely to stick around longer and come back more often to view more ads in the end, which makes them more money. That's what it's in the pursuit of. But the results in the way that happens ends up in censoring of political speech from most of the time the right side of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So, to get back to your point, Josh, about the First Amendment, no, it is not in violation of the text of the law, because it's not government preventing speech of citizen.
Mm-hmm. And no one's being arrested.
Yes,
for saying something
or threatened,
that others people disagree
arrested
with.
or threatened. Correct, yeah, but at the same time, is it in the violation of the spirit of the concept of freedom of speech? Absolutely. You guys have anything else you want to add on the kind of that perspective?
You mentioned hate speech, and I don't like hate speech. I mean, what's hate speech? I mean, what a terrible term, it's hate speech, but and I've gotten grief for this in the past, but when say, is hate speech protected by the First Amendment? I say yes. I do. I say yes. Because, first of all, I don't even know what hate speech is. One person's hate speech could just be another person's politically incorrect statement, or it simply could be...
Edgy.
Yeah, it just could be, it could be a joke, it could be a lot of different things. So, I mean, to me, is hate speech protected by the First Amendment? Absolutely. Yeah. It is, I like that you brought up the idea of the spirit of the First Amendment. Now, is it going against your First Amendment rights for a private institution like Facebook or Twitter to ban you or kick you off or punish you by their own means for something you say? Well, sure. Yeah, sure it is. Just no different than when your boss says, hey, you're not allowed to say that at work. Oh, yeah, what are you going to do to me? I'm going to fire you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to fire you if you keep saying that. You can't...
the only place where... There's only one place in the United States where political affiliation is a protected class, and that's the District of Columbia.
Yeah, okay. And that's...
That's it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, believe it or not, you can be fired in the United States for being a member of a party without recourse. Right. That is an acceptable reason for termination.
But one has to ask. I mean, because I'm going beyond here what has been ruled by the Supreme Court or what has been ruled by certain courts or what has been deemed acceptable by Congress. But if you live in a society, if you can always say, hey, First Amendment, First Amendment, First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. But if you live in a society where your basic views can get you fired from a job, ostracized from society, or simply put into a lower class of human.
I think the word you're probably searching for is unpersoned.
Sure. I mean, if you live in a culture, in a society where your beliefs can put you into that, do we really have freedom of speech? I mean, do we? I would venture to say that when the Founding Fathers brought forth the idea of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, that although they would be the first to tell you that, of course, your speech still has consequences, that if you are going to be ostracized from society at large because of it, then that isn't really freedom of speech, is it? And I do think that there is a question there. If there are certain things that you are not even allowed to say out loud with fear of being unpersoned, as you put it, then, come on, do we really have freedom of speech here? Do we have freedom of speech? Because that becomes a side note here at this point.
Yeah.
That is no different than somebody saying, I think I should have the freedom to have clean water. And the government saying, you do have the freedom to have clean water. And this is something I agree with, by the way. You do have the right to have free water. You can, collect rainwater and boil it in your house, and you can have your clean water that way. But you can't get it via pipes, that have been cleaned through the government. So if they're saying that, yeah, you have freedom of speech, you just can't say it on the internet. You just can't put it on paper. You can't say it out loud. You can't say it in a courtroom. You can't say it at your kid's school. You can't say it at your job. You can say it in your living room, though. Go right ahead. No one's stopping you from saying that in your living room. Well, shit, they had that in communist Russia. They got that in China. They got that everywhere. What good is freedom of speech if you're not allowed to say it in your damn living room? That's not freedom of speech. There does come a point where one has to say, okay, if I have freedom of speech, then where the hell am I allowed to speak it? And that to me is the grand question here. That is what's truly being What's truly being asked when they say that, no, you're not, your speech isn't being censored, it's just being censored on Facebook. Well, Facebook is how we speak. That's how we speak nowadays. You know, 2018's Facebook was 1818's newspaper. You know, that's how we speak now.
That's how public discourse is done.
Correct. And to me, and this is a separate issue, I know, but to me, the minute Facebook starts to become regulated by the government, then government rights need to be imparted upon said institution.
Okay. Adam, you've been awfully quiet here for a couple minutes. You got anything?
Is Facebook being is social media being regulated by the government now?
It appears to be going that direction. And Zuckerberg seems
it's regulated like every other communications business at this point. I mean, does it have necessarily a special set of regulations for it specifically? Not quite.
It's in the works, though. Am I wrong? I mean,
well, there's essentially regulation is usually a decade behind the problem. So,
quick question off the cuff. If something is regulated by the government, do we have a right to it? Because to me, by definition...
Dude, that's a whole other episode.
Well, but it's not, though, because the minute the government starts regulating how we speak,
then grants itself
then we cease having freedom of speech.
Okay, so
if the government's regulating the press, we don't have we don't have freedom of press.
I get what you're coming from here, because the idea is the second regulation creeps in, it gives the ability to grant and then take away, which means it's no longer a right. Yes. Is that what you're getting at? Okay.
Which is why I think when people scream Second Amendment, I would say, what are you even talking about? The Second Amendment was destroyed decades ago. The minute the government starts to regulate our right to bear arms, then we know it's no longer a right. It's a privilege. And I would say that they're doing the same thing at this point with the press, with speech, with religion. And to me, then Fourth Amendment, privacy comes next.
What do you mean next?
Oh, well, that's, it's there, but I feel like that's not the one that's being, hey, I firmly believe that in our country as we live right now, to me, it's like a backroom deal between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats will take care of the Second Amendment, the Republicans will take care of the First Amendment, and then they'll team up together for the Fourth Amendment. I mean, that to me is just what is like their plan, and to say it's a plan, it's like, oh my god, what, it's a plan? No, it's like it's actually working. Like it's pretty much they've succeeded practically.
Fair. Well, to kind of give it a little bit more back on track here, the importance of freedom of speech and openly available and free public discourse, specifically on political and social issues. One of the consequences of living in a both ethnically and politically diverse society is there are going to be disagreements. Mm-hmm. If you can't hash them out with words, human beings will hash them out with guns, bombs, only fists if you're lucky. When a country, a state, loses its ability to conduct public discourse, whether that's through censorship, regulation, or just societal issues, it becomes very violent very quickly. And the only way to fix that, unfortunately, is violent revolution. I hate to sound that extreme. You may tell me to strap my tinfoil hat loose, but if very few places have had sustained freedom of speech for the long time, and that's a lot of that has to do with because it's never, it was never really sustainably tried until it has been here in the United States on a broad scale for a long time, where it's gotten to the maturity of where it starts to break down again and it's being challenged. If I'm afraid that if we don't double down on the concept of, not only the First Amendment and taking, not just the letter of it, but the spirit of it, if we don't double down on that concept, we may lose freedom of speech as a civilized people forever. Because, ultimately, this isn't an era where you can run a violent revolution. States are too powerful. You can be vaporized from the sky by somebody sitting thousands of miles away. Mm-hmm. Do you think, you're realistic? Oh, that would never happen here in the United States. Bull fucking shit. There will be no violent revolution here in the United States. Everybody who thinks there will be, or that they have a shot in hell of winning one, I would like you to, acquaint yourself with the U.S. government's best friend, the Predator drone. You don't stand a fucking chance.
I was in an argument with, or a debate with someone about a month ago, and I'm not even going to talk about what the initial debate was about because it's so off topic. They said, I mentioned something, the idea of what you just brought up, Dorf, and they said, the American government wouldn't do that. And I said, hang on. I said,
it does it to everybody else everywhere in the world.
I was like, no, they actually do it all the time. They're like, no, they don't. I was like, no, they don't do it to Americans.
Well,
right
they
now.
do.
Well, but just not that frequently. But
not within the border. They don't do it to Americans.
The American government kills innocent people all the time. They basically the statement they said, and you will probably draw conclusions as to what we're potentially talking about. They said, well, the American government wouldn't just kill children. I said, the American government kills children every day. He said, what are you talking about? They kill children every day.
Indirectly.
I was like, they don't kill American children every day.
They just indirectly killed a bunch of
for sure,
kids on a bus in the Middle East.
But but they wipe out villages in the Middle East on a daily basis. I mean, they wipe out,
and not to mention, how many different insurrections have they financed where innocent civilians die?
Right. This is what I'm saying. I mean, and I'm not even saying I oppose it. I mean, what the hell do you guys think Hiroshima was? I mean, a whole bunch of innocent people die in these bombings every day. Now you can make the argument, and the American government makes the argument, and other people do as well. But yes, there was collateral damage there, but we did it for the best. Okay, fine.
And you know what?
But even the American government doesn't deny that they do it. They do it.
I mean, they don't advertise it,
right?
But yeah,
but it's there. It happens all the time. So I mean, this idea that they won't take this bigger leap towards it, that they won't commit evil. No, they will.
And I forget the gentleman's name, but he was a U.S. citizen that had gone to and joined a terrorist cell in Yemen. They droned him.
Yeah.
And they got around getting in trouble with U.S. law with that by just declaring him an enemy combatant. Oh, he's an enemy combatant, therefore he loses his rights as a citizen to, a fair trial. Precedent set, man. All of a sudden, you're a part of let's just call it a separatist or rebel group, and you're out in Montana, in the middle of Montana.
Say you're on a Facebook page
enemy combatants on U.S. soil. They don't have their citizenship rights. Drone them.
Maybe you did a podcast talking about how, talking about the differences between anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism. And one person on the podcast agreed with anarcho-communism, and the other person agreed with anarcho-capitalism.
Not a lot.
And
you still have that?
Yeah. And
Josh's note page where he wrote the two names on the top and then didn't write anything else down.
And then they deem those two people anarchists who oppose the government. This would be me and Adam in this case.
The legitimacy of the state, and therefore it's a threat to the state. Therefore, they have legitimate rights and rights as the state.
Tell me why this person who decided that Islamofascism was a proper ideology. Tell me why that's different than what Adam and I did on that episode.
Hey, I was here too.
Yeah, but you were riding the fence the whole time because that's what you do.
Surprise.
But Adam and I mean, shit, we're straight up anarchists, according to that podcast. And then we can say, hey, we were speaking subjectively, right? I mean, we were just talking.
Dorf will be living on the outside of the camp.
Yeah. Just right outside.
Whew, God, it wasn't me.
Well, I mean, Adam and I won't be in a camp. We'll be getting droned.
Well, another concept I want to introduce here real quick is the concept of, believe it or not, there is precedent within the existing law to kind of regulate social media, the concept of what's like a safe harbor doctrine within copyright law and copyright, libel, slander, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, social media companies enjoy platform status. So platforms are immune from civil litigation and, for the most part, criminal prosecution of user-generated content if it's in violation of the law, whether that's copyright, that's some sort of other law-breaking activity, because it was published by a user just on their platform. They are immune to prosecution as long as they, take the infringing article down, or article, video, post, whatever, down within a reasonable amount of time. So they would become, immune to legal repercussions for that. But in order to enjoy said platform status under this concept of safe harbor laws, they have to be neutral. They have to be politically neutral. They have to be neutral arbiters in order to enjoy that status. You can argue now that they have lost that status and become publishers instead of platforms, because they're now curating, censoring, selecting, filtering, shadow banning, you name it, content for debatably political reasons. Now, that opens them up to all sorts of hell legally and lawsuit city, where this, if you reclassify them as publishers, this might take care of itself. Where, shit, we better, be neutral here. Otherwise, we'll be sued back into the Stone Age inside a year. We'll need to retain so many lawyers, we'll be out of business in 6 months. So, I mean, you could twist the screws from that perspective and not be in violation of free speech. But if we want to get back to the more philosophical angle and the more, spirit of the discussion here, is censorship of political views on social media a violation of the spirit of your constitutional rights? Because I think we've established here that, legally speaking, a private company can do what it wants for the most part, and therefore it's not the government censoring citizens; it's a company.
Well, that's going to say, Dor, isn't everything kind of in a catch-22 here? I mean, it seems like people will scream, the rights of business and, free economy and, free markets, and a free market will help dictate, a bad business decision by some of these companies. And can't you just go out and start your own social media platform if you don't like?
And here's another thing to that point.
But isn't that what essentially what America's all about, is being able to do that type of thing?
You are correct. However, this is another thing that you're starting to see people run into. When you have unpopular political speech, people are brigading payment processors. People have recently been unpersoned from the internet by MasterCard because their payment processor necessary to keep their website up and running no longer has the will to do business with them, because they've had enough people brigade. And because MasterCard can't be bothered to deal with the overflow of feedback, it just, we're going to cut our losses and make the payment processor no longer do business with these guys.
Hey, Josh, you know what takes care of all of this?
What?
Anarchy.
It does. It does.
You've also seen web hosts refuse to host content. I know it's a little bit old and it's an extreme example, but there's this website. It's unabashedly neo-Nazi, the Daily Stormer. It had its web hosting yanked by GoDaddy about a year ago because, well, their content is reprehensible, but at the same time, yeah, it's a private company, can do what it wants, but isn't most of what they say on that website? I know you guys have never read it. I've been to it like twice just for research purposes. Isn't most of what they say can be classified as political speech? And are you then violating the spirit of the First Amendment? Now, you're right. They have no legal recourse.
You absolutely are. You absolutely are.
They're awful people. And then now you look at like Alex Jones.
Illuminati show.
Yeah. Captain, the most memeable person on the planet. He has been driven off with his web host will come for him next. That's the only place he's left on the internet is his own website.
Right.
And when his web host comes for him next, you're going to, yeah, he's out there. He's fucking batshit crazy. But the majority of his topics are political, and he'll be driven out of the political arena completely here very, very shortly.
The true.
They've only got one more stick to crack here.
One thing is though, Dorf, how do these private companies combat against something like this when take for instance an Alex Jones follower goes out and commits a crime in the name of what he heard,
his conspiracy,
what he heard on InfoWars.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
All right, I have an answer for you here.
And it rolls down from there. It goes first. It's Alex Jones. Then it goes back to whatever it is that he used to convey that message on, whether it's his web host. So all of a sudden, that lawsuit is now targeting HostGator, and then beyond that, it is then targeting Twitter. And it's then targeting Apple because his app was on the iTunes store
until the other day. Yeah,
until the other day, and now he was broadcasting videos and posting videos on Twitter.
Okay, I have a very simple answer to that question. Very simple answer to that question.
Okay,
in a just world with judges who are right-minded, then the answer is simple. That case is thrown out in 5 seconds. It's simple. Personal responsibility is the answer to that question. The person who did that is 100% responsible for what they did. Alex Jones didn't tell anyone to go hurt anyone. And even if he did, I mean, Adam, if I go tell you right now, Dorf is a jerk, but he's too big for me to fight.
I wouldn't mind if something happened to him.
So I want you to kick his ass.
I'm not fighting Dorf.
Well, I want you... Okay, Dorf is too big for both of us to fight, so I want you to shoot Dorf with a shotgun. And you do it. I am not responsible for what you just did to Dorf.
Actually, in that exact scenario, you have a direct call for violence. You would be be responsible.
In a right-minded society,
but what happened in the Alex Jones...
I would not be, though, in a right-minded society.
Legally in the United States, you would be partially responsible. You'd be co-indicted for that.
Well, actually, that isn't true, though.
If exactly what you said was what happened, the reason that Alex
Dorf,
Jones
actually,
is not a... Hang on, here, let me...
That isn't true, because he would still be 100% responsible, but I would then still be 20% responsible, which then illogically gives 120% blame. Because Adam would still be responsible, but then they would also try to levy blame on me as well.
Yeah.
But Adam would still be 100% responsible for what he did.
So... legally, criminally, because you have a direct call for action there, you asked him specifically to shoot me in this scenario. You do have legal criminal potential criminal penalty coming your way.
Okay, which Alex Jones never did, by the way.
Which Alex Jones didn't do. What Alex Jones did do in this case is riled people up and essentially said, so I'm going to turn it back to our example, hey, Dorf's a dick. I wouldn't mind if something happened to him. And you took that as a direction to do something. then Josh would not have any responsibility in this case when Adam murders me. Because, I didn't directly tell you to do it, which that's what Alex Jones did in this case. That's why he's not criminally liable. However, he is civilly liable, and he's being sued by the Sandy Hook parents for very similar, because he didn't directly call for their harassment, but because of
he indirectly did. He is civilly liable for that speech, and he's going to lose.
Yeah,
he's going to lose in civil court. He is not criminally. Anybody can be sued for anything, essentially.
Right, but a logic-minded, just judge.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a society made up of human beings here.
Well, but the system dictates that wouldn't,
because it's made up of imperfect, illogical, emotional human beings.
But that was never an issue until 40 years ago.
I have not studied enough on the subject, but I'm not going to just take that.
I mean, for instance, you guys brought up the Sandy Hook thing. Okay, Google has banned the book "Nobody Died at Sandy Hook." There's a legitimate book out there called "Nobody Died at Sandy Hook." Maybe you guys think it's garbage. Maybe most people think it's garbage. But this book was written, and although most people do not believe it, there are people out there who legitimately think there are some things worth noting in said publication. They have banned this book
from showing up
from Google and Amazon. But, okay, that's great, right? Okay, that's fine. Hey, they banned something that's bad. But get on Google right now and buy Mein Kampf. You can do it in under a minute.
Amazon sells it.
Yep.
It's like
they sure
one
do.
of the top 10 selling books every year on Amazon.
Yeah.
Test me. Or
they
timing.
Sure do. Okay, I'm timing you.
You're not actually going to buy it, are you?
No, he's not going to buy it. He's broke.
Well, anyway, I got one more point on before we go off on this, before we get too far away.
Okay, I do want to make one more point.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, please do. But I'm listening.
$15.98.
Okay.
It's a deal. Actually, it's not. It's a
deal
terrible
twice
book.
the price.
You guys ever read it?
No.
It's terrible. Not just is what he's saying terrible. Adolf Hitler's
it's poorly written.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's poorly written. He's a terrible writer. I mean, he does not have a way with words, and you could have easily said "I hate Jews" in less than 9,000 pages or whatever that book is. It's terrible.
So
it's a piece of garbage.
Anyway, the Alex Jones, the reason that his web host and Twitter, to your point, Josh, aren't liable, whether criminally or civilly, as the delivery method for Alex Jones's potentially illegal speech, is it's not necessarily one of law, but it's one of precedence. The same reason you can't sue gun manufacturers when somebody's shot and killed.
Mm-hmm. The entire statement illegal speech to me,
because there are limits on freedom of speech, because pretty much about all it is direct calls for violence.
According to the Supreme Court ruled later, there are limits to freedom of speech. According to the Constitution of the United States, there are 0 limits to freedom of speech.
True, you're right. But the way
incitement to riot, fighting words. No,
the inciting the fighting words. Fire. The classic example of fire in a crowded theater. Mm-hmm. That is by precedent banned.
It is illegal to call a cop a fascist. It's not illegal to call a cop a motherfucker.
Is it actually illegal to call a cop a fascist?
Yes, because that is considered fighting words. Ruled upon by the Supreme Court. Because to a cop who is a first responder and someone who
there's a bunch of the Antifa crowd out in the Pacific Northwest that should be in trouble for that.
That technically, but it all depends on the frame of mind of the police officer. If you call a cop a fascist and he knows what fascism means and he is offended by that, then that technically is not covered under freedom of speech according to the Supreme Court. Again, not according to the Constitution, but according to the Supreme Court, you cannot call a cop a fascist, but you can call a cop a motherfucker. Because what is that? That's does he have kids? Well, then he fucked a mom. I don't know. That happened.
Okay. We could go on for this for a long time, but I think we're going to try and put a lid on this one and be done here for the evening. Can I go around the table here? Anything else we want to add here on the subject, guys?
Just one thing, briefly.
Sure.
This is an opinion of mine that used to be not a controversial opinion. This used to be something you heard a lot from conservatives, liberals, from a lot of different people. And I think it's an opinion worth noting, although it is just nothing more than my opinion. And that is that I oppose censorship. I don't oppose censorship because Constitution. I oppose censorship because I believe it to be wrong. I believe that the First Amendment and our right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion are based on morality. I believe we have a moral right to be able to speak our mind and to say what we want to say. So when someone is inhibiting your freedom of speech, even if it isn't technically opposing the First Amendment, I view it as wrong. So I say that I oppose censorship. So I oppose censorship on Facebook. I oppose censorship in the news media. I oppose censorship on television, in movies, in anywhere where censorship is done. I shouldn't have to. Now that's just my opinion. You can agree with me or not agree with me, because maybe you like censorship. But I shouldn't have to oppose censorship on the governmental level. We have that already. We have that protected already with our First Amendment right in the Constitution. I should never have to worry about the government censoring my speech. But I can oppose censorship in any level. And that's the stance I take.
Okay. Adam, what about you?
It's really a difficult subject, and I think that the United States government has, in essence, made it that way.
Mm-hmm.
The United States government has made this a very complex issue. It's like I think you can equate it to the catch rule in the NFL, Dorf.
Nobody knows what it means, and it changes weekly.
It does, and
or the strike zone in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it is. It is what it is. And I thought you brought up a very good point, Dorf, about the civil and criminal.
The difference between the two, yeah.
Yeah, trials that Alex Jones. Well, he's going to be facing that civil trial.
I think they're already kind of in the middle of it, but like any other large scale civil lawsuit, it takes for fucking ever.
Yeah, but I thought that was a good point to bring up, the differences between the two, and like I said, I think this is something that is brought on to be more complex because of legislation, government legislation, and it's not something that's going to be changing anytime soon. So I don't want to say roll with it, but citizens of the United States have no choice.
And here's another thing, just kind of wrap it up here. We have no choice but to be vigilant on this subject. You could argue as soon as you give ground on Amendments 1, 2, and 4, the other two will quickly follow. Mm-hmm. This is something that throughout the history of the world, especially in the more modern experience of free people, this is ground you do not want to cede back, because you won't get it back for generations, if you get it back at all. Mm-hmm. It is important. Freedom of speech is incredibly important, and in the new modern world, I think in general, government.
It's not a coincidence that it was the First Amendment.
Yeah. It's pretty important, it was part of the Bill of Rights for a reason. It's very. It was there's some symbolism in it being number one.
Right.
And with that in mind, as the modern world progresses and changes, and you're not necessarily censoring the speech of the town crier, you're now censoring the speech of people in the one way that they now communicate primarily, that being the internet. I hate regulation of business, but unfortunately it may be a unfortunate necessity going forward that, you're going to have to get the goddamn U.S. Congress involved, who's the worst thing. It's the worst governmental legislative body except pretty much all the rest of them in modern day. So with that, anything else, guys?
Adam, I think you made some really good points there. And I would just say that regulation and legislation, by definition, are the enemy of freedom.
They are.
Hashtag anarchy.
Anyway, that is going to wrap it up here tonight, guys. This has been episode 5 of Politics of the Empire, presented by theempiremedia.com. We do not have an established next episode coming yet, but it will be on a Tuesday, probably in 2 or 3 weeks. Stay tuned to our social media and theempiremedia.com, not empiremedia.com, theempiremedia.com.
He means the empiremedia.com.
T-H-E.
There's no Y in there.
Theempiremedia.com for more updates and that's where you'll find out when our next scheduled program will be. So for Josh and Adam, I'm Dorf. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, Dorf.